what's even the mind? Let's even start from there. What's a sound mind and what's the mind? And we're going to look at the number of sources in terms of that and how does it relate to mental health. We're going to look at challenges to soundness of mind. Why do people lose soundness of mind? What tends to happen? What can cause us to lose that? And what's the body mind spirit link? Because as we said, Tripart care is really an emotional well-being and it's really about we look at mental health from a holistic point of view that's including the body, the spirit, and the soul. And then how do we what are the things that we can do to keep our mind detoxed, to keep our mind uncluttered? One of them, just giving it up front now, is journaling. There is evidence showing that really when we journal, when we take thoughts away from our thinking spaces right onto paper, that does help to declutter the mind, and it helps to free the mind. It also helps us to actually understand ourselves more. It also helps sometimes it can be a problem-solving experience where particularly when it's reflective, when it's about trying to analyze our experiences, our emotions, our thoughts. And then we're going to look at sleep, rest, and relaxation. Um, how does that impact on the health of our mind? And I just want to put that up front now that I encourage you to wait till the end of the meeting because at the end of the meeting, I'm going to share something special about, particularly for the ladies in the room, something that I'm sure you are interested, you would want to hear about, particularly an event for ladies regarding rest and relaxation. So for those who stay tuned till the end, that's going to be one of the benefits. And then we are going to look at food and exercise and sunlight. Surprisingly, uh, the wisdom of the ancients talks about the ancient people, the people of old used to talk about the benefit of sunlight. I know there are still people who will not spend their winters in temperate countries. People think, oh, maybe this is just myth. But now science is actually proving that there is wisdom in that. And there is quite a lot being said now about exposure to sunlight. And that's something we're going to talk about and how it affects the mind. And then stress management, we're going to talk about that as well. And we're going to look at those resources generally. That's meant to be mind resources, not boundary resources. So let's start with this. Taking care of your mind. One of the reasons is because it's the only one we've got for a lifetime. But the good news is this, though it's the only one we've got for a lifetime, we can actually change it through the way we take care of it. So there's nothing like I can't change my mind or my mind cannot change or my mental cannot change or the way I function in my thinking or in my intellect cannot change. There's no such thing. We know that. So as we begin to look at the mind, to start with, the mind is the seat of our thinking. It's the place where we process our thoughts. And we now know that the mind is different from the brain. The brain is an organ in our body, an organ in our skulls. The brain is an organ in our skulls where and that's what coordinates all the functions of the body, from the head to the toe, is like the executive place where all those things take place. But our mind is a different part of us. Our mind is actually not something physical. Our mind is part of our souls, which we are going to come to. And the soul comprises of the seat of our emotions, the seat of our intellect, the seat of our trees, and the seat of where we also imagine things. That's what the soul is. But the mind is a component of that. And so the area of the mind where when mental health problems actually take place, many times it's usually in the area of the mind. It can then affect the body, and of course, it can affect one spiritually as well. However, according to the WHO, they say when they are thinking about a sound mind or when they are thinking about mental health, they say it's a state of well-being where an individual is able to realize their potentials. They're able to cope with stresses of life, and they're able to work and contribute to community. That's really so. It's just so in terms of thinking about a sound mind is one in which a sound mind is one that can maximize its potentials, one that can cope with stresses of life, one that can also work productively. Because if our minds are not sound, it affects productivity. But it's also not just about work. It's not just about paid work. It's not just about even something like this now. We are all gathered here on this online space today. None of us are being paid for this. It's not some sort of vocation, but every one of us has some satisfaction that we get from it. And I'm sure that we were to take a count in the room this evening, there'll be several people who are involved in some sort of voluntary work or the other, some sort of contribution to community. It doesn't necessarily have to go by the name voluntary work, but there's contribution to community in one way or the other. So, so when we think, the WHO says that when our minds are sound, well, when we got good mental health and our minds are sound, then those are the things those are the hallmarks that lost that sound mind. The Public Agency of Canada, Public Health Agency of Canada, actually, they are more robust and more holistic in the way they look at a sound mind, or they look at mental health. They say it's our capacity to think, feel, and act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life. So, but what they also say is that they then incorporate a spiritual dimension to their own definition of mental health. They say it's also a positive sense of emotional and spiritual well-being. So the Canadians, the Public Health of Canada, sees that there is more to public health than just there more to mental health than just the mind. They are also incorporating spiritual well-being. They are talking about interconnectedness, that plays a role. The connections we have, the social connections, that loneliness, for instance, now is now being rated to be equal in this negative impact as smoking in terms of longevity. So they incorporate other things that are of a spiritual dimension. They incorporate social justice. They incorporate culture into their own definition, and that's because this definition of the Public Health Agency of Canada actually resonates more with us at Tripart Care, because we know that there is more to us than our physical bodies. There's more to us than our minds, that we also have a spiritual part of us that connects with God. Um, so this the I was calling it the definition of mental health, and that's incorporating WHO definition, that's incorporating Public Health Agency Canada, and coming up with something unique to it. And the only difference is that we now look at it that every one of us here are here on an assignment, and we've got a purpose attached to us. And when our minds are not sound, it's difficult to feel that purpose that has been earmarked to us uniquely. And we also then that mental health is a fluctuating attribute. It's all human beings possess mental health. There can be good mental health, there can be poor mental health, and it can fluctuate depending on what in our lives and where we are in our lives. For instance, I think it was yesterday I put up a LinkedIn post about how at some point a few years ago, not maybe within the last 5 years, how I got to a point when I knew that I was actually experiencing burnout. And that was something that I needed to own up to and do something about. So so our mental can fluctuate. It can move it can fluctuate on the spectrum, and that's important to know that. So I'm looking at this slide. I wonder what is one single word that you will use to define it, and you can type in the chat. Just looking at the slide, forget about the letters. Just looking at the graphic, what word come to mind? What will you use? What do you think about when you look at this slide? Okay, balance. Good, balance. Princess Pafaji says balance. Elizabeth says balance. Who else wants to take it? Equilibrium. Okay, good. Balance. Okay, yeah, balance. Yeah. Any other takers? Harmony. Good. Okay, yes, good. Rest. Yeah. Finding a balance, absolutely, yes. Yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah, it's really it's about balance. And the important point that this is really making is that there are three parts of us: the body, the soul, the spirit, and each of those need attention. Today we are focusing on the mind, which is part of our soul. All of that parts are so interconnected. We now know that there's a very heavy of the spiritual on our minds. Things like being an habitual person who is grateful, gratitude, forgiveness, not harboring anger or resentment. Science is now telling us, really being able to show it in a measurable way, that those things are toxic to our minds. That when somebody is an habitual complainer, when they don't see anything to be grateful for, because the reality is that, to be honest, if you got off your bed this morning, for crying out loud, if you got off your bed this morning, uh, there's something to be grateful for. Because the reality is that not everyone who went to bed made it out of bed this morning. Not everybody who went to bed last night made it out of bed this morning. So if one gets the crunch, and there's nothing we must always, but so science is now showing us all of this, that um, in fact, that things like gratitude, being able to offer forgiveness, even prayer, meditation, and I've always said that when I meditate, the scriptures is what I meditate on. That all of those things. So there's an interlink. We also do now know, so there's now huge information coming out that physical health affects heavily on the health of the mind. That things like cardiovascular illnesses, diabetes, high cholesterol, all of those things also play an impact on the mind. For instance, one of the things that is being said is that all of these things are associated with chronic inflammation, and that chronic inflammation can explain depression. Some people are linking it to anxiety, dementia, all of those things. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we cannot think of ourselves, we cannot compartmentalize our life and say, oh, it's my body, it doesn't matter, it's my mind, it doesn't matter, it's my. All of those things are linked, and the health of one will eventually affect the health of the other. If the health of one is robust, the health of the other is more likely to be robust. And if the health of one part goes down, eventually the health of the other parts go down. And this is what I call both a scriptural and a scientific model. This is just explaining some of the things I've just said earlier. The body is the part where we make contact with the world. The body, the part where we make contact with the world, and it's our senses. But the soul is where we have a relationship with ourselves. And I've said that before, that many times people talk about how interpersonal relationships. How about intrapersonal relationships, the relationship you have with yourself? And that has, in fact, probably more important than interpersonal relationship, because if one is not at peace with oneself, it's difficult to be at peace with other people. If intrapersonal relationship is not at optimal, it's difficult to see what's happening for other people. Okay. Right. So, and the spirit obviously is the part of us that connects with God. So what can make things go wrong with the mind, then affect mental health? We know this is a that I've shown a number of times before, but just for recap, basically a good way to look at them is to look at what I call the 5 N's: nature, the genetics. It's really about, we know that sometimes problems of the mind can run in families. It can be passed on through genes. And I always say that it's not automatic that because somebody's parent or somebody's sibling had a problem, a mental difficulty, that they would automatically do. A good illustration, which is from Dr. Daniel Amen, very globally renowned psychiatrist of the Amen Clinic, is the genes load the gun, but stress pulls the trigger. Basically, that the genes, one could inherit genes that make one prone, but it doesn't mean that one would then automatically manifest mental problems or difficulties with the mind. Because what could then happen? Because if one is able to manage that effectively, then it's possible not to. Temperament is another one. People who are more introverted, particularly who, not just being introverted, but people who don't talk much, or who don't discuss, who share or share thoughts, might be more prone. Nature in terms of nurture in terms of, so that nature in terms of genetics and temperament. Nurture is about how somebody was raised. And I know people listen to me more than once know that that's one of my pet peeves, childhood adversity, the way we raise our children, that really each one of us who have children in our care currently, either as our children or as our grandchildren or as our nieces or nephews, or as people we teach in Sunday school or people we teach in our classrooms, for those of us who have the privilege of teaching children. The reality is that we are literally wiring them for that. We are wiring their mind for the future. The things, the way we talk to them, the way we them, the way we associate with them, the things we say to them, the way we celebrate their successes, the way we challenge the limiting belief that they have about themselves is actually preparing the structure for their mind, for the way their minds are going to function in the future. So, and we know there's lots of research showing that the mind is affected, that even some of the people who are problem in the mind at the moment, or who are experiencing challenges in the mind, has nothing to do with what happened now. It's actually to do with the template that was laid as children. And childhood adversity, lots of things, losses, poverty, maltreatment, particularly physical, sexual, emotional abuse, all of those. And so it's all like those would then template that would then people at a higher risk of minds having problems in the future. But let's even come down and talk about not just it's not just about that now, it's also about really managing our minds that we keep them healthy to the point in which they're optimal to achieve the things that we need. We also like I said earlier, that chronic physical illnesses, negative life experiences, social stressors, loss of spouses, loss of members of the family, divorce, separation, all of those things can cause problems in the mind, and particularly narcotics and drinks. I think over the last 26 years since I've been a psychiatrist, I've seen the scientific community in a very small way begin to rewrite our understanding of alcohol, particularly. I've seen us become more rightly so and aptly so and happily so, become more and more conscious, more and more cautious about how we portray alcohol as being harmless. Because more and more, you can see, for instance, now, we first went, the UK, the Department of Health went from saying that 21 units, 21 units for men and for 14 units for women was they called it safe alcohol intake, weekly alcohol intake. You'll find out that if you check that recommendation now, there's nothing safe about it again. The word safe has been removed because we are beginning to see that actually maybe there's no amount of alcohol that is safe. And very tactfully, that word safe has been removed. We're also even saying that even no matter how little alcohol is, that it still has an impact on the brain, and it doesn't look like it's healthy. And of course, narcotics. Also, when children are born, birth injuries, maybe when they don't breathe on time, when they have to spend time in special care baby unit, maybe the labor was prolonged, maybe they had meningitis as a child, all of those things, or even maybe they had viral infections, or the mother even had viral infections as a child, all of those things can then develop, can impact the way that develops and their minds then function later in life. So, food, how does food affect minds? To start with, there is now an evolving, really rapidly evolving area of psychiatry called nutritional psychiatry, where people are looking at the impact of food on how our brain works and how our mind works. And that's becoming a growing area because more and more we are beginning to see that the things we put through our mouths affect every aspect of us. And it's not just what you put in, is the right proportions and the right amount. Previously, they used to say 1/3 that you should have 1/3 of fruits and vegetables. 1/3 of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. 1/3 should be proteins, and 1/3 should be fats. Off the press, I listened to a dietitian who was speaking on food and mental health and food and mind. exactly a week ago. And she was actually saying that now people are saying that, in fact, maybe the half of your plate should actually be the vegetables and the fruits, whereas you then divide the protein and the fat between the half, which would then be a quarter of protein, a quarter of fat, and then fruits and veg. Because we are now finding that really that's a very part of the diet of a diet. And in terms of also even the um the starchy part of the food should really be an wholemeal variety. In terms of brown rice, brown bread, meal pasta, and that sort of thing. And protein should be the low fat dairy, and also to avoid high salt or high sugar, and things like such as um, processed foods such as processed foods such as say sweets. All of those things can be um, be, they can um, they can be quite impactful in a negative way. And of course, drinking lots of water. So that's still all about the impact of food on the brain. But our brains are made of water, and water is made up of fat. So what are the things that we can really eat that of particular benefit? Um, there are food that are rich in antioxidants. Antioxidants are actually there are chemicals in the body that we gain that the body makes, but what they really do is that they mop up the toxins that we're exposed to and that we encounter all through our waking day. So whilst we are going around, when because of maybe when we're exposed to stress, when we're exposed to things that cause all sorts of chemicals to be released in our bodies, toxins are also produced. And those toxins can damage our cells. So antioxidants, which are derived from food, um, are actually helpful in helping us to get rid of those things that damage the cells. And so any food that is rich in that, and the more colorful our food is, the less processed and more colorful they are. You can see that this slide is a very colorful one, and that's deliberate. The more colorful and less processed they are, the more likely to be rich in those things that are important. And all the important thing about antioxidants is that they actually reduce inflammation. And like I said earlier, that there's a very strong link and between inflammation and disease. That's disease of the body, disease of the mind, all sorts of disease. There's quite a lot of link between those. So these are the brain. I call it the A to Z of superfoods for the brain and the mind. Avocados, because they are good for brain health. They are good fats. In fact, personally, on a personal note, I'm not there yet, but progressively, I'm moving away from using butter to using avocado. And believe you me, with just a sprinkle of salt or anything that you want to use, maybe some seasoning, at some point you'll cease to know the difference. And actually, you're also doing your body good. Blueberries are one of the most powerful fruits in terms of antioxidants. Blueberries they are really, some people call them brain berries because they are really very rich. Banana is really about it's high potassium content. Avocados are also rich in potassium. And the good thing about bananas and avocados is that because they are rich in potassium, they they can also be one that is contributing to cardiovascular health, particularly in terms of lowering blood pressure, keeping it supports potassium supports a lower and even blood pressure. So which will mean that but obviously banana alone cannot be the only thing that will do that. But having banana in one's diet because of the high potassium content is a good thing. Broccolis, it's really about the vitamins that are in them. Cinnamon is also another one that is underused. and it's anti-inflammatory. It's good for cardiovascular health as well. And like I said, anything that is good for cardiovascular is good for brain health and it's good for the mind. Green tea is also one of them because it's also rich in it's also its the ability to be antioxidant property and also its ability to basically to help in that regard. Greens, that's vegetables. Um, Oily fish, that's the sardines and the salmons. They are rich in omega-3 and 6, which are also very good for the brain. Um, Also olive oil. One way to play it safe is the Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet is rich in fish oils, rich in fish generally, rich in non-meat protein, and also it's rich in the carbohydrates that they tend to use are whole meal carbohydrates, and then particularly lots of olive oil and lots of fruits and veggies. Turmeric, another one, particularly also because one, it's also anti-inflammatory, but also it's in terms of thinning the blood, um, that can be effective. So water. We can't go wrong with water. And that's because all the systems in the body run on that. I think I've said my bit on alcohol. That's more and more the scientific community is getting more and more cautious about how the in quotes safe alcohol. It doesn't look like what we currently know tells or supports the notion of safe alcohol. Smoking is out of vogue and sitting has taken its seat. So smoking used to be on the throne in terms of it used to be on the throne in terms of one of the hugest damages to one of the things that's as they carries one of the greatest propensity to cause damage. Of course, it causes damage to the body, and of course, it will cause damage in implication can cause damage to the mind as well. But it looks like has been chased off that seat and sitting has taken that seat because we now know that not exercising can be equally as damaging. Um, and so that brings me to the next slide, which is on exercise. It's the single most important brain health action that you can take. So it's that powerful. And it looks like science is always changing. We are getting to know more and more things. We're now saying that actually that it's not just aerobic exercises. It's not just going to the gym and running on the treadmill or walking or anything that shoots up heart rate up to 120. That used to be the recommendation that as long as you do 90 to 120 minutes of aerobic exercises a week, you are home and dry. But now research is showing that it's more than that. That is not just aerobic exercises, but also we need to be doing resistance exercises as well. Resistant exercises is about building our muscles. So it's about lifting things. It's about pressing, about push-ups, all of those things that really stretch our muscles and build our muscles, because we are now knowing that actually that one of the ways that the body deals with glucose and deals with food is the muscles, and that having strong muscles is a good thing in terms of dealing with in terms of our metabolism. That well-developed muscles are also good for getting rid, because when we after we've eaten, our body digests the food, produces glucose, and that glucose shoots into our bloodstream. When we exercise immediately after, even going on just 10 to 15 minutes walk within a 30-minute meal, within 30 minutes of having a meal, what happens is that the glucose doesn't actually go into the blood, but the muscles actually suck up the glucose directly in such a way that the one that goes into the blood is less. But not only so, it also means that glucose is then stored as energy rather than as fat. So that's where the wisdom of, maybe you would have heard that people say there's now science more and more research showing that particularly after your dinner, if you go for a 10 to 15 minute walk or you walk around your living room, or you just take your phone call. Sometimes for people who have been with me on the phone, many times when I'm speaking to people on the phone, particularly in the evenings, I'm walking up and down the room. It's very rarely the case, except I've had a very flat out day, that I will take my phone calls sitting. So usually, because it will probably be after my dinner, and whilst I'm taking the phone call, I'm on the phone and I'm walking up and down the room. And that's really it. It's adding to my exercise. Also, I've said before that I have a treadmill in the living room, and without fail, most days of the week, I will usually do 30 minutes exercise. That's the only way it can be done. But I think the important point is that we now know that aerobic exercise is not just that resistant exercise is also very important, and that there's now quite lots of science supporting going on a 10 to 15 minutes walk. It's not even a run, just a walk 10 to 15 minutes after a huge meal. It makes a lot of it's good for the system, because what it prevents is that because the glucose doesn't shoot up, because the muscles the muscles take part of that glucose. It means that there's less glucose in the blood. There's no spiking of the glucose, and it means that the body doesn't have to release insulin to take care of it. Insulin is the hormone that takes care of, or that drives glucose into the cells. And when insulin is not spiked all the time, it means that the body doesn't become resistant to it, like it happens in diabetes. We know that diabetes, heart disease, are when they also carry high risk of association with mental difficulties. So there's some research also showing that walking 45 minutes 4 times a week is almost equated to the effect of antidepressants. How does exercise help? One, there are very few areas of the brain. There are areas of the brain that that continue to regenerate even as we get older. And one of the areas is the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain that is associated with memory. And we know that as we exercise, that actually stimulates, it enhances the replication, or the division, or the multiplication, or the generation of new cells in that area of our brain, which is the area of our brain. So having new cells in the area of our brain that is good, that is responsible for memory, can never be a bad thing. That's one of the ways exercise helps. The other one is it regulates blood sugar, like I said earlier. The other one is that it reduces stress hormones, cortisol. It reduces those levels, and also I don't know whether you feel it after you've had an exercise. You feel good about yourself. You just feel good. There's a feel good factor when you've had rigorous exercise, and that's because it releases happy chemicals, endorphins in the brain. And as I said earlier, it's similar to antidepressant effect. The other one is that it also it stimulates the production of certain proteins in the brain that protect the brain. So really, then we go to sleep. When we sleep, in ideal, we should have 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep each night, because it is when we sleep that our brain has the ability to clean itself. It's almost like our brain goes through a car wash, or goes through a detox process, clearing all the toxins that has been acquired in the brain over the day when we sleep. And that's now proven that it's almost like it's almost like we take the brain to the dry cleaner when we sleep. So when our sleep is interrupted, it's not very good. And in fact, one night's poor sleep is enough to show up when people go through MRI scans, and to show that there's something amiss. Sleep is also very important to converting short-term memory to long-term memory. That's why, particularly as you get older, pulling a late night is not a good idea. Just as one gets older, it's not really ideal for the brain. And it's not ideal for because our decision making becomes poorer. We are less able to think clearly. We are less able to tolerate stress as well, and we are more volatile in our moods. And these are all proven. If people have not proven it, even if the research is not true, I've proven it in myself that um, I think I tolerate stress a lot less when for any reason I've not had a good night rest. I'm sure that people in the room who can test, who can, or maybe it's a eureka moment for you. You now know why sometimes you are grumpy after you've not had good night rest for some time. So sleep is necessary before and after learning. Um, uh, and on sleep, I would like to recommend a YouTube TED Talk by Professor Matt Walker. You can take a photo of that if you wanted to. Matt Walker is the leading person on brain, is a global leading name on brain, and I think he's written a book, Why We Sleep. And it says that 40% deficit, there's 40% deficit in brain new in making new the brain's ability to make new memories after we've had a poor night's sleep. And it's done a TED talk, or a number of them actually, but there's one called, I think it's called Sleep is Your Superpower. Yeah, it's called Sleep is Your Superpower. So things to do to maintain good sleep, avoid caffeine after 3 p.m. If you want to have a power naps are good, not more than 30 minutes, but it's got to be before 3 p.m. as well. We know that there's some evidence as well that power naps, sleeping during the day, if you can, for those who have the luxury, it's good for not more than 30 minutes and not after 3 p.m. Um, things like mind staying off the phone maybe 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime is a good thing. Uh, Regular bedtime. People are now even saying that rather than just setting the alarm to wake you up, you should also set the alarm to remind you to go to bed. That it should be both ways, and that should be really very regular. I think as you get older anyway, you just find out that it becomes, at least the waking time becomes regular. At some point, you just find that your body is so programmed that way. But at least one can do something about the bedtime. Ensuring adequate exposure to sunlight. It helps not only with melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone in the brain that helps us to go to sleep. But importantly, people are now saying that, in fact, that for those who can afford it, I know that for some people it's not workable, but there's some evidence supporting that within the first hour of the day, if one can be exposed to sunlight for 10 to 15 minutes, not only does it help with sleep at night, it also helps that throughout the day, your cortisol levels are lower. And cortisol is the stress hormone. And when cortisol is perpetually high, it's associated with chronic stress, and it's associated with global damage to the body, global, and also associated with poorer longevity. So that's also something people are now science is supporting about early exposure to sunlight within the first hour of waking up. I know that obviously it's not always possible. Um, but for people who go, for instance, sometimes I do a prayer walk, and in that case, then I can put that into my schedule. Also, it's also important to check vitamin D levels, because we now know that vitamin D is a culprit for sometimes for poor moods that hasn't been discovered before. Keeping exercise Morning exercise 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. So in terms of chronic stress, the things to think about are one, um, chronic stress is bad for every part of the body. It affects every system, so it's not really good. But it affects memory. It affects. It also increases our sensitivity to stress, where little things can get on top of one when one is chronically stressed. And so the thing to think about is, what do you do to rest and relax? There's also a lot of um, evidence supporting rest and relaxation in having a sound mind, in terms of going on breaks, going on short breaks, in terms of going travel as well. There's evidence supporting traveling, but all of this support that is a short-term effect. So it's not something that it's probably for the short term. That's what most of but it's still good enough, even if it breaks the cycle of stress. There's also links that rest and relaxation is good for even in prevention, particularly of anxiety and depression. So it's about understanding our personal stressors and modifying them. So 10 ways to make mind kind. That's to be kind to your mind. I think we've talked about most of them. Also watching our associations and watching what are the tasks that drain your energy and who are the people that drain your energy. I know people like to put up a front or pretend or we all show up like there's no such things in our lives. But the reality is that we know the people who are energy drainers, who tire us out. And if we can manage those associations, that's good for our minds. And I'm all for love, but I'm also all for boundaries and knowing how to interact with people. It's about knowing who to interact with in terms of knowing who to speak to on the phone, how regularly to speak to them, whether it's their voicemail type of person, whether it's email type of person. It's really, particularly if one is in a relationship, for instance, if one is in a in a place where one has to deal with a difficult person, that is somebody that they've got to always deal with. Maybe it's the father or the mother of a child whom the relationship has gone sour, but you still need to continue to deal with them. It's important to put things in place to think about how best to manage those relationships because the wear and tear effect of toxic relationships, I'm sure that for some, if there's anyone who is here tonight and hasn't seen the toxic relationship video, is now uploaded um, I think it was in February, and that's generated a lot of responses. There were several people who got in touch and who wanted to discuss, who wanted to talk about it. So I think it's worth thinking about. And new things, learning new things is good for our mind. So that's also, I think that's almost like a summary of what I've just spoken about so far. The one that I haven't spoken about is cold showers. Um, I've just started to read up more deeply on the benefits of those, and apparently there are also that cold showers for up to 2 minutes is associated with lowering of cortisol levels as well. And cortisol levels are associated with chronic stress. So that's also something to think about. It doesn't have to be an entire cold shower. After a hot shower, you could then, in fact, I think they also say that that alternation as well can be of benefit. So after a very hot shower or a warm shower, then turning the tap to cold. Uh, um, I'm trying that out. It's not as easy as it sounds, but turning the shower to cold, my wife does that really well. Every time she has a hot shower, she finishes it with a cold shower. I think I love warm things more than so, but it's more. The other one is ecotherapy, that being exposed to even walking in the park for up to 20 minutes has been known to also lower cortisol levels. Particularly, they also say that plants do have a particular chemical that is secreted that we're exposed to as we walk with nature, or whether you want to wear your shoes or not, that can also help. Um, so if you were to think about managing your mind on a global way and capturing it on one page, it would be this slide. And I think most of them we've already talked about. But that's the tripart care concept of what it entails to manage one's mind. So resources, I've talked about sleep is your superpower. I've talked about Daniel Amen, his Instagram page. I've talked about our own Facebook, not Facebook, our own YouTube channel, and also our Instagram channel as well. There is a book by Jim Quick. It is very hot on the brain as well. I think Limitless Brain is called, not Limitless Book, Limitless Brain. Other resources, the Blue Zone is really about living long and healthy with a healthy mind as well. Because what science is also showing is that people are living longer, but maybe not healthier. So life is being prolonged, but the quality of life doesn't look like it's matching that race. So people are living longer, but then living longer in ill health of the mind and ill health of the body, because both of them, as one gets older anyway, both of them interact. So it's about investing in those years now so that we can reap the dividend when we get older. There's a Netflix series called Live to 100. Brilliant. It's on Netflix. I think it's about 3 or 4 series. They went and studied people who lived the longest and with less dementia, the incidence of dementia and all of that. And they were able to profile those people and see what they do. Um, so I've just come across this today, gottysnacks.co.uk. Some of us like our snacks, but at least if we are going to snack, let's make it healthy. And this guy is a GP himself, Dr. Leke Asong. He's a GP himself, and he suffered with bowel problems for a long, long time. And as I became a GP, he began to research, and he has now started producing really healthy snacks that are good for the bowel. And what's good for the bowel is good for the brain and it's good for the mind. Steve Larsen, he has a YouTube channel talking about really about managing our minds, detoxing our minds, and particularly it comes at it from the Christian point of view. Really brilliant resource that he's got. I think I've shared some of them on the WhatsApp group within the last few days. He's somebody I've just come across as well. And then www.stress.org.uk. That's also one to think about, really thinking about managing stress and really assessing whether we are stressed or not. Because chronic stress is a killer, but the interesting thing is that most people who are chronically stressed don't even realize it. It's almost become a norm. The brain is almost always at hyper alert, high go. It's almost like it's always in a flight, fight, or freeze mode, and the body is just accustomed to it, but it's not healthy. Neurocycle app, that's an app. It's about mind detoxing as well. Dr. Caroline Leaf. The Soul Time app is also an app for it approaches managing mood, managing the mind from the Christian point of view. Scriptures, worship, lots of things on there. So right now, talking about resources. So I did say earlier that particularly for our ladies in the house this evening, that I was going to share something that I think is a very important resource and very one that I would highly recommend. If it were for men, I would have signed up yesterday, to be honest. But it's not for men, it's for women. And this is it's Oasis Retreat that is being held by Reverend Atinuke Omishade. She's going to be hosting this event at the end of September. And it's really about taking women away. It's going to be a transformational holistic weekend, really to put these things into practice, not just to talk about them, everything involved, the exercise, the gym, the relaxation, the roaming wild, just really being exposed to nature, the spa, gym, and particularly it's also there are different people who might be able to relate to this. For some women, it's just because they need to reset. They need to take time to go out and just because they're overwhelmed, they are stressed, and really one can understand a woman's lot in modern day is a lot. So some women just need that time away. For some women, for particular, that's the reset retreat. It caters for those needs. For some women, it's because they keep pouring out to other people. There are women in ministry, and that's the holistic retreat. For women who are in ministry, maybe they are pastors or pastors' wives or leading a ministry, and they're always pouring out and don't really have time to come away and be poured into. And 6 months is quite enough notice to plan. And for some women, actually, to encourage their churches or their ministry to send them out on this retreat because it will be money well spent. Because we now know that our leadership is as good as we take care of ourselves. If our bodies, our mind, and our spirits are not in the right place, if we keep pouring out of an empty cup, it's only a matter of time. And sometimes we also lead from the place of brokenness, but not when we've been healed, which can be very damaging to the people that we lead. So that's for the holistic retreat. And the lead well part of it, which is for women who are maybe women who are in leadership, maybe directors, executives, people who are in the marketplace doing great things. Sometimes as well, they're carrying pressure, they're bearing burdens, they're casting visions. but sometimes they need to also be able to have a place to go back to and to refill and refire. So with all of that said, if it's something that catches your fancy, and I hope it does, please just type retreat to atinúkẹ́.omíṣádé@gmail.com, and that's all on the it's all on this flyer. So, and then you'll be given more details. I'm sure it's going to be time well spent for you. So what are the other things that Tripart Care does? We do coaching, we deliver workplace mental health and well-being consultancy, public speaking. We can support your churches in delivering training to your staff or to your volunteers or to your leaders. And then those are the themes that we cover if it was for corporate organizations, lots of things on there. And 19th of September is another date to put into your diaries, particularly for church leaders or charity leaders, because we are going to be doing another bespoke Saturday training for really geared at leaders late in the morning. And we'll come together and we'll discuss something that is really relating to leadership, mental well-being and emotional well-being. We've done emotional intelligence, we've done trauma-informed care, and I think next time it looks like we are going to be looking at abuse, how we can inadvertently abuse and how we can be victims of abuse ourselves in leadership and what we can do about this. The emotional intelligence course for engaged couples and newly married couples is still on the horizon. It will happen. I know it will, by God's grace. And we also, a few years ago, I think 3 years running, we ran a 4-week course for 18 to 40-year-olds. And that's still something that if there's an appetite for it, we could bring it back again. And we also have the book club that meets on the third Thursday of the month. That's held by it's led by Dr. Awolaran, who is in the room tonight. And coming on to what we are doing for next month. Next month is also mainly for the ladies and for those who care about them. So we, the spouses, the children, the sisters and brothers, because we are going to be talking about menopause and mental health. Menopause is the elephant in the room that nobody talks about and is as huge as ever. So I'm really super excited that one of our team, Dr. Awolaran, will be taking that on. She's done quite a number of presentations on menopause and mental health, and I'm looking forward to being in the audience next month and just being the co-host. And I'm sure she's going to do justice to it very effectively. So please come on and come all. Please spread the news. Menopause, we are going to be discussing menopause, thinking about it from all the ramifications, cultural, spiritual, scientific, everything menopause. And then we move on to the men in June. We are going to look at 7 masked faces of male trauma. The more I look, I encounter men in the clinic, in community, in all the churches, all over the place. I'm beginning to see that some of the things that we hold men responsible for, that there's a lot of unaddressed trauma that's driving it. And it's no spoiler alert, but in the coming edition of Keep the Faith magazine, I've actually written on that, and I'm looking forward to delivering that webinar in June. It's really about some of the things that we deride our men for. I'm not excusing men. I'm not excusing us, but I'm saying that maybe we need to look deeper. Maybe some men that we label as bad, maybe they have actually been wounded and they need healing. Maybe when we look at things in that way, maybe we can have better results and outcomes. So we are going to look at PTSD in August, substance misuse. A very prominent addiction specialist will be doing the substance misuse talk in July, and I'm looking forward to that. The last one he did for us was super. The attendance was off the charts, and the feedback was be huge. So we are looking forward to that. And then we're going to look at social phobia in September and mental health and work in October, and then trauma-informed care. So the Tripart Care Instagram page. Please check us out on Instagram. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that so that you can be adequately informed whenever we post any new slide, any new videos. And within a week, this video is going to be on the YouTube channel. So we have a number of WhatsApp groups. This is the generic WhatsApp group. Anyone can join that. It's a safe, sensitive space. We look at mental health in all the ramifications I've talked about. So if you take a photo of that QR code, it will take you on there. And this other WhatsApp group is for leaders. It's really about discussing the matters relating to leadership, how you need to be in a robust place yourself as a leader to be able to lead other people. Otherwise, it will bleed through our leadership. So that's for that. And then that's the book club. The title of the book is The Body Keeps the Score, one of the most renowned books that's ever been written on trauma and recovery from trauma. It looks at the science of it, but also in practical terms. Really brilliant book. And those are the contact details for anyone who wants to contact us. And as I believe that our YouTube channel, the link would have been shared already. And so that's the final slide. Thank you for listening.